The billing manager is really intended to simplify that process of charge entry across multiple encounters. When you have those types of events where you have to bill them out separately, maybe even in separate practices, depending on how you're structured in NextGen. What we've done is we've created a tool that takes all the relevant fields of the encounters and puts them on one screen in a grid that's configurable so that you can enter these without having to jump around NextGen. If you think about your process today, you probably have an encounter that gets created when the patient checks in, and that becomes what we call the base encounter. That's the one where you're taking in the patient, you're assigning the insurances, you're setting up the defaults, that type of stuff, and that's going to be the template for which the other encounters will be created from, even if we have to create the person as a patient in one of your other practices. The way the demo environment here is configured is for an ophthalmology type practice, but we can change that configuration and we'll work with you in your test environment to set it up so that it meets your needs. Normally one of the first things we'll do is set up the configuration, and we do this in the group maintenance because we're creating groups of encounters for each one of these. So in this case, we have our professional charges, and in our scenario here, we're using that as the base encounter. That's the NextGen practice and encounter in it that's going to get created when the patient shows up at the window and checks in. And then we have additional encounters that'll be created for a scan, for the ASC itself, and then for the anesthesia. So I've designated one of these to be the base. I've also told it for the other ones to use the base encounters insurances, and we can set the minimum and maximum for each one of those other encounters that we want created. Normally where this is important is if you require some other encounter to be created, you could set the minimum to 1 instead of 0. We can also, if we don't want to use the base insurances, we can use the last encounters insurance within that practice. In most cases, you're probably going to want to use the base insurance because the person may not exist in that other practice if you are going across practices. And then we can map the rendering and referring providers from that base encounter to other positions. So the rendering in the clinic may become the referring in the surgery center because you may have a different surgeon. So we give you configuration here to be able to manage that. And then of course, we probably want all the encounters to be on the same service date in NextGen. So we can go ahead and do that. And then we recently added to propagate the bill hold date onto the other encounters if you want. So these are configurable, and these are groups of encounters. So you can have one or more encounters within each group, and you can have many charges under each encounter. Currently, we support up to 7 of these, and that's something we can expand in the future if you had a need. So that's the configuration. We'd work with you, we'd set this up once, and then you'd go in and have your charge posters go in and create those other encounters. Often they're working from some other list of base encounters and then creating the other encounters. So if you know that base encounter number, you can type it in and get to it quickly. If you have to search for a particular patient, we can go ahead and put in that patient and find them in the list and then go ahead and select it from there. But it's much faster if you have the encounter number to type that in, and it'll pull up that base encounter and any charges that were put on it. Now, we're starting with the base of the professional charges. We'll see it's in the practice NextGen medical group, location, encounter number. So all this is being pulled out of the encounter that's in NextGen already. Up here on the right, it'll pull the primary insurance that was used. Here's the service date, and then it's marked as enroll for the status. And that's really letting us know that it's in NextGen, but it's not configured as part of this set of encounters that we're going to create. Now, if we decided, you know what, I have an additional charge that I want to put on this one, I can right mouse just like we do all over NextGen and say add new charge, and I can, look up another code and pull that in. All right, it'll bring down the diagnosis, whether I have one or several of them onto the other ones. It'll bring down the other attributes. As we look across this, we'll see here's the service item, and we'll see that's highlighted up above, the sequence, the quantity. So we've taken, again, all those fields in the NextGen form for the encounters and charges and put them here in a grid where they're just easy to see several of them on a single screen. So this saves you having to do all that shifting around, especially when you get to the point of creating those other encounters. Let's say now I want to create a surgery encounter. So I can go add new surgery encounter and it'll pull it down, and I can change my location if I want, facility, patient type, all that's available. I get over to my rendering, and this one was configured so that the rendering from the clinic becomes the referring for the surgery center because we're going to have a different surgeon. So I can go ahead and do a name lookup and pull that back. And there are hotkeys too, so you don't have to use the mouse. So I can do along the bottom here, it says Control N is new charge for whatever encounter I'm in. Control 1 is professional. Control 2 is A-scan. And those names will change next to the control keys based on your configuration. So I can come in here and do a simple SIM search. So I can go ahead and take, 6620, pull that in. I can add another one real quick, and you can see how fast this becomes. And, I can scroll down and pick another one, bring that back in. So right now we've templated out an additional charge up here, another encounter. We don't have an encounter number yet assigned to it because it hasn't been saved in the NextGen at this point. We can see the status is insert, which means it's brand new. It hasn't been created in NextGen and it's new here. All right, so we have that one set up. So now if I want, I can go ahead and do the anesthesia charge. So I can go ahead and do a Control 4, and that'll bring us down here to the anesthesia. And I can go ahead and pick my referring here, or my rendering in this case, and I can do a Control N, and I can pick an anesthesia sim. Now with the anesthesia, just like in NextGen, we support all the time mappings and roundings that are set up based on the payer. So it'll bring if there's a base unit, and then it'll calculate the additional units, and it'll go ahead and do the math up here. So we have the, 5 times 90 ends up being 450. And again, just like in NextGen, you can override that. But you can see again how quickly you can move through this. In a lot of cases, you don't even need to use the mouse. You can just use the hotkeys and go ahead and do that. So now that we have these additional encounters and charges entered, it's just a matter of clicking save. It'll go do the work in NextGen, and then we move on to our subsequent patients. If I pull this up, we can see that we had our original encounter, our new charge. We now have an encounter number for the surgery center and the charges underneath that, and we have an encounter number for the anesthesia too. So if we go up to our NextGen and switch over to the surgery center, we can go look at that encounter real quick. And show you what was created. Again, in real life, you wouldn't actually go look, you just kind of keep going and entering your various other encounters and charges that are needed. So here's our new encounter, our rendering referring, our charges were brought over in here. So all that gets done for you on your behalf, and the who when information retains the user who went ahead and launched the billing manager.